Welcome to the program. Today I will be speaking with Judy DeKuehn, who is a licensed professional counselor, and her practice, Fresh Perspectives Counseling, is located in Denton, Texas. Judy specializes in working with adults and children dealing with trichotillomania, which we will learn a little more about today. She also treats clients with eating disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorders, and anxiety disorders. In addition, she has experience with grief issues and conflict resolution. She is dedicated to her own continuing personal and spiritual growth and is committed to assisting individuals live fully and freely in deeper relationships with God and others around them. Stay tuned, and we will be right back to speak with Judy DeKuehn.
Theresa Westbrook's books and music videos are now available. Her ministry resources are helping to bring hope and healing to wounded hearts. Visit her website at pearlsofshalom.com for more details.
Judy, before we go any further, I always like for my guests to share with our viewers a little bit about how they became to be a Christian.
Okay, well, I don't mind sharing that at all. I was raised in a household where we were in church every time the doors were open, so I've always had an awareness of who God is and who He is in my life. So I wanted to incorporate that in my practice as a counselor. It was in my 20s and 30s when I really realized how difficult times can crystallize your faith and how that can really help move you through some difficult times. So I wanted to incorporate it into my practice. But I also want to be very aware that sometimes there are clients who come in who have been harmed in some way by individuals who've been condemning or judgmental, who may have said some things that are a little insensitive during some very difficult and personal times of trauma in an individual's life. And many times I do get individuals like that. So when that happens, I try to be extremely careful and very sensitive to that. But I think that when you're dealing with an individual who has trauma or has conflicts in their lives, it's important to follow along from lots of different angles. We are, after all, mental, we are physical,
yes.
We are emotional, psychological, but we're also spiritual. And I feel like healing from each of those modalities and incorporating that healing it gives one a more three-dimensional healing, so to speak. So I try to be very careful about that. Spirituality is, of course, a very difficult topic for some people, but I certainly do like to address it when given the opportunity.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, you also have your own practice,
Yes, I
Fresh
do.
Perspectives Counseling, right here in Denton. So tell us a little bit about the mission of your practice.
The mission of my practice is basically to be there for individuals who are struggling, but to be a resource, sort of like a life coach, if you will, to give them tools to craft their own recovery in a way that benefits them. Each individual is unique in the way that they struggle, the way that they problem solve, and the skills that they have to do so. So when I have a client that comes in, I like to do an assessment to find out where they're at on all of those levels, and then to incorporate any kind of information that I can give them and work with them sort of as a coach to help them craft their own recovery.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, wasn't all that long ago that I had the opportunity to meet you and establish a relationship, a working relationship with you. And Judy, as some of you may know, I've just recently written another book, and it's called The Advocates of the Abused and Silent. And this book has true stories of other child abuse survivors in it who have given permission to share their stories in it. And then I just created a unique platform, a little TV program within the book, and had experts on the field to come in and speak, and anyways, really unique. Well, Judy graciously gave us permission to use her full name, her true name in the book, because I actually had an abuse survivor who suffered from trichotillomania due to her child abuse that trauma that she experienced as a child. So that was really nice, and so that's how we kind of came to know each other. And you can find my new book on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and also my website. But you might be asking now, okay, well, Theresa, what in the world is Trichotillomania? Now that is a mouthful, isn't it?
It certainly is.
And I'm sure our viewers will need to know about that. Well, not only is Judy an expert in this field, but she's also written a new book about this very topic, haven't you, Judy?
Yes, I have. It's just recently come out. It's available online, and the title is Freedom from Hair Pulling. Trichotillomania, for those of you who may not know, excuse me, is obsessive hair pulling. It's a very fancy word that I think eventually will be revised to just be basically the hair pulling disorder. I think the mania on the end of the name is quite off-putting for many people, and it mistakenly implies that there's a mania associated with the condition, and that's not true. Trichotillomania is a fancy word for hair pulling disorder. And there's a lot of people who are sort of under wraps and don't come out in the limelight, so to speak, that when they're stressed, one of the coping mechanisms that they employ is that they pull hair. And it can be quite debilitating because we all put a lot of emphasis on how our hair looks. For instance, individuals who have trichotillomania may be very uncomfortable getting their photos made, sitting in bleachers, being outside on a windy day. They just really struggle on a lot of different levels that most people take for granted. So it's a very little understood disorder, but I believe there's a lot of people out there who do struggle with it. Do you
have any idea what the percentage is, maybe?
Yes, anywhere from 3 to 5% of the population actually struggles with trichotillomania. There's a wonderful website that you may or may not be aware of called the Trichotillomania Learning Center in California, which is an international information center for individuals who are struggling with hair pulling. The website is trich.org. And there are only 7 therapists in the entire state of Texas who are listed as specialists in this disorder. So there's
7 in the state of Texas,
7
and you're one of the 7.
Yes.
Wow.
So there's a very big need for more therapists to become informed about this disorder, to be able to help individuals with trich.
Wow. Wow. And the hair pulling, it's just not on the top of the head, but it can be eyebrows, eyelashes. Like my survivor, it was her eyelashes, and she had no idea. And bless her heart, she went through school that way. It was way after high school or high school years before she even knew what was going on. And it's not gender specific, is it?
No. Now, there are more women that are reported as having it than men, but that's kind of questionable. Researchers are wondering if that's actually true. Because men can pull from beards, from the top of their hair, and that can be attributed to male pattern baldness. People don't really raise their eyebrows when a man is bald on top of his head, but if a woman were, it's quite surprising. Most people don't understand that. So men can hide it better. Men typically do not seek professional counseling as often as women. They don't network as effectively many times. So men are probably underreported. Typically more women are reported with trich than men, but men do have it.
Yes. And well, I've actually seen that myself. I have seen a young gentleman pulling the hairs at of his beard, you know, when just sitting sort of absent-mindedly, just kind of pulling at the beard. But this is a hidden shame-based disorder, isn't it? And so people would probably, with that percentage, it's possible that people would know unknowingly know someone with this disorder.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, wow. Well, can you share a few tips maybe with our viewers how they could break such a devastating habit like that?
Well, you know, it's trichotillomania is a very interesting disorder because it's different for each person. Particularly, there are basically 2 different types of pulling. There's what we call the automatic pullers, who, what you were just describing, would pull without really realizing what they're doing. Maybe when they're talking on the phone or driving in the car, those are pretty much common areas where a lot of people will pull abstractedly. They just don't really realize they're doing it. Other people will pull in a very focused manner and are what we call focus pullers. And they're very determined to pull. If the house were on fire, they would still be pulling their hair in front of the mirror or wherever they pull. So we have two different kinds of pullers, and to make the situation even more complex, many times we have pullers who switch back and forth between pulling styles. So what makes treating someone with trichotillomania so interesting is that it's imperative to get a treatment plan that's specific to that individual's triggers, that individual's pulling styles, and so it becomes different for each person. So it's a little difficult to give specifics on that, but you know, the old standbys, hand toys, a lot of people will come to me and say, I've been to a counselor before, but they didn't know anything about counseling. They told me to have a hand toy and told me to play with toys when I wanted to pull my hair. That's pretty typical for what I hear. There's a lot more to treatment for trich than just having something in your hand to do. And so it's a really very complex disorder, and there's a lot to the treatment of it.
Well, we've already kind of established that it's trauma that can cause this or bring this disorder onset, but what are some other things that could bring this onset to people, this disorder?
Well, it's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, because a lot of people think, well, I had a very wonderful childhood. I didn't have any trauma, so why am I pulling? You don't necessarily have to have trauma in order to experience trichotillomania. There is definitely a genetic link. There is a genetic link. And trichotillomania also involves skin picking and nail biting. So the formal diagnosis is not just hair pulling, but we can have individuals who pick at their skin and exacerbate sores and to the point of severe infections and scarring. We can have individuals who chew their nails and bite their cuticles to such an extreme degree that there are chronic infections and skin damage. So we're talking about some very severe and limiting behaviors, but there is a genetic link. So for instance, if we have viewers who have trich and they don't understand why, they've not had any trauma, they might look as far as Aunt Ida or Uncle Joe and see if they were severe nail biters or skin pickers, because there is definitely a genetic link. But there's also genetic predispositions to how one handles stress and how one copes with difficulties. Individuals who may be very shy and are in extreme situations where there's a lot of stimulus may need a way to cope and may not have good coping strategies. So not only is it environmental, not only is it genetic, but it's also internal as to how much an individual can handle and what sorts of coping strategies they have. The best coping strategies that are used with this are going to be things like cognitive behavioral therapy, of which I specialize, and also some recent research has indicated dialectical behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, two very different strategies that marry along well with CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, that teach radical acceptance for distress, that teach a commitment to move forward in the face of distress. Things along those sorts have been scientifically proven through research to be very beneficial. So there's a lot of different components to trichotillomania that need to come into play, which is why it's very difficult for me to say, tell us something that will help. It's very difficult because each person is unique.
Well, absolutely, and I think all professionals, ministers, doctors, counselors, teachers, anyway, we need to look at everyone as an individual and the total man, as you said, mind, body, and spirit.
Absolutely.
To make them complete, you know. And of course, we know how a person can be complete, and you're really not complete without Jesus Christ. So we know the way to become complete. Now, you mentioned one of those modalities, dialectical?
Dialectical behavioral therapy.
Now, what is that?
It is a therapy that's based on, like I said before, radical acceptance. we all have stress in our lives. We all have things in our life that we wish weren't so. And for instance, we may have a boss who's a very demanding boss and is very difficult to be around, and yet we need the job. So how does one handle that situation? Some people can handle it better than others, but you don't handle it as well when you fight against, I wish this weren't so, this can't be true, I can't have this in my life. He absolutely has to change because I can't stand it if he doesn't. That creates a great deal of struggle internally. A better way to handle that might be, I'm not going to be able to change my boss. How can I decrease my own levels of stress? What can I do to stay grounded during this difficult life challenge? And so dialectical behavioral therapy will work a client through some of that and show them how to handle the stress in a more productive way, because we can't change the fact that the boss is a jerk, but we can certainly change how you respond to that.
I think they made a movie out there about bosses.
They probably made several.
I forget what's about bosses, though.
Yeah.
But, well, wow, anyone can benefit from that.
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying, you know, wake up dreading to go to work, wake up dreading to see a person. I mean, I think all of us has been in that.
Yeah, and like I said, we all have
before.
stress. We all have circumstances in our life that are difficult. How does one navigate one's way through that well? And so dialectical behavioral therapy has a lot to say about that.
Wow, wow. Well, my goodness, I'm so glad that we have people like Judy out there helping people, because that was way over my head. But Judy, Christian counseling has really come to the forefront in the body of Christ, and there is a place for it. Of course, nothing takes the place of the Word of God. Nothing takes the place of our relationship with the Lord, and one moment in the presence of God can take care of what it takes counselors many years to take care of, because I've experienced that. I'm sure you've experienced that. But yet there is a place for it in the body of Christ. Would you share with our viewers some of your thoughts and insights on this?
Well, I think what I've said before is very applicable to this, in that we are complex individuals, and there are a lot of things going on internally whenever you're dealing with a difficult life situation. You're dealing with the intellect, you're dealing with the emotion, you're dealing with the psychological issues, maybe past triggers. All of that needs to be taken care of from what we're talking about, a counselor's perspective, a cognitive behavioral therapy. We want to get into the thought processes. We want to talk about the behavioral issues, but the emotional aspect of that as well. But none of that is addressed succinctly without addressing the fact that we're spiritual creatures as well. And that when you bring in the topic of spirituality, it's a very healing topic when it's handled appropriately. What I have found in my therapy is that many times I'll have people who have been harmed because it hasn't been handled in a sensitive way, and people are not interested in hearing anything at all about the spirituality of the issues involved, which makes my job as a counselor just a teeny bit difficult, because we are so complex, and all of those issues need to be dealt with. So again, I try to be very careful about that, but if my client is open to that, I certainly want to embrace that and incorporate it into the healing process.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Judy, I've actually heard you speak at a workshop before, and so are you available for workshop seminars?
Absolutely. Anytime anyone needs information on Trich, feel free to contact me. You can contact me through my website, freshperspectivescounseling.com. I have an office here in town. For those who do have Trich or know someone who does, I actually have a free support group that I oversee, if you will, on the first Saturday of every month. I have one support group for adults that meets from 10 to 11, and I have another one for young girls. I don't have any little boys in my support group for the children, but I have quite a few young girls. And I've found through trial and error that it's more beneficial to separate the adults from the children, because they're very radically different issues that need to be discussed. So I have one adult group and one child's group, and they both meet the first Saturday of every month.
Oh, wow. Well, that's nice. That's wonderful. So some of our churches out there, this would be great information for you to get to your congregation, maybe put in your church bulletin and let them know that there is something available here in our community that can be very healing and helpful to our community. So praise the Lord for that. Well, tell us a little bit about that book, Judy.
Well, like I said, there's only 7 counselors in the entire state of Texas that specialize in treating trichotillomania. And I've had many clients that have come to me and said, I've been to a therapist before. They were kind of helpful on some general areas, but they didn't know what to tell me about my hair pulling. And so I have clients that come to me from Oklahoma, from South Texas, from all over. And sometimes it's just not possible for an individual with trich to find a therapist who understands the specific components to the treatment of this disorder. So I felt like it was important to put something out there on the internet that is a common resource for lots of different people so that they could order the book and find out, what do I say to a client who comes in with trich? How do I work with them? What sorts of therapy practices do I engage in? And so for those individuals who find it difficult to find a therapist who understands about trich and they're seeing a regular therapist, it's an additional tool that they can use. They can take that information to their therapist. They can use it individually if they're not seeing a therapist. It's just basic information on treatment of trich.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I wish you much success with your new book, and congratulations. I know what a labor of that love that was, I'm sure. But now, how can they get the book?
There will be a link on my website, freshperspectivescounseling.com. They can also look online through any of the online bookstores and should be able to order it there. It's Freedom from Hair Pulling, and there are very few books out there online for treatment of trich. There's just 2 others that I'm aware of that are online, and so it shouldn't be too terribly hard to find if you Google it.
Okay, awesome. Well, would you look at your camera and just share with our viewers today just some insight, some encouraging words, give them some hope if they're struggling with any kind of a disorder, any kind of compulsion, something they think, oh, I just really wished I had someone I could talk to that would really understand what I'm going through. What could you offer them today?
Absolutely. Theresa, the first thing I would tell you is that if you are struggling with trichotillomania or obsessive compulsive disorder, there's some similarities to both. If you're struggling with that there is hope available, and that there are individuals who have overcome this disorder, who are living a pull-free or obsession and compulsion-free life. It's not easy, and it does take work, and it takes working with someone who understands the specific modalities of the disorder, but it is possible to move forward and to live a very full and productive life in the face of having this disorder. So I would offer you hope. I would offer you the knowledge that I've worked with other individuals and they have overcome, and there's hope for you.
Awesome, awesome. And I would like to thank Judy for coming to be with us today. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're a delight, and I'm loving the friendship that we're developing now that since we have come to know each other. And thank you for tuning in today. I am your host, Theresa Westbrook, reminding you that today's pain embraced is tomorrow's pearl of grace. God bless you.
Okay, folks, here we got something here you've been waiting for all night. Now, you won't believe this, but this is really a little jewel. How do you like it? Now, what would you give for this little jewel? How many dollars on it? What would you give here? Isn't that a little doll? We got a nice little violin. What do you want to give for it? Isn't it a nice little...
'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste his time on the old violin.
Hang this on the wall and make you a nice little...
But he held it up with a smile.
$1 for it. Would you give me $1 for it? Who'll give me $1 for it? Would you give $1 for it? You're missing out on this little jewel now. Wouldn't you give $1 for it? Look at there. Look at the polish job on that little jewel there. Look at there. And the bow goes with...
What am I bid, good friends, he cried. Who'll start the bidding for me?
Study your question here for just a minute here. Now take a look. Wouldn't you give $1 for it? Now who'll give $1 for it? Nice little violin. Nice little one here. It walks, it talks, it's almost human. Now what would you give for it? Would you give $1 for it? Give me a hold. Somebody give me a bid on it. Would you give $1? Only $1? Would you give $1 for it? Yep. I've got $1.
$1. Only one.
$2.
And who'll make it two?
One bid. Would you go $2 on it? $2. Would you go $2 on it? $2 will get it. Would you go $2? $2 on it? I got $2.
$2. Once and three. $3 once and $3 twice. Going and going. But no. From the back of the room, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. And wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening the frayed, loose strings, he played a melody pure and sweet, as caroling angels sing. Music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said,
And now what am I bid for the old violin?
and he held it up with the bow.
Who'll give $1,000 for it? I got $1,000. $1,000, now $1,500.
$1,000.
And now
And who'll make
2,000.
it two?
And now 2,000. And now 2,500.
$2,000. And three.
I got 2,500, now 3,000.
3,000 once and 3,000 twice, and going and gone, said he.
Gone.
The people cheered, but some of them cried, we don't quite understand. What changed its worth? Swift came the reply. 'Twas the touch of the master's hand.
Theresa Westbrook's books and music videos are now available. Her ministry resources are helping to bring hope and healing to wounded hearts. Visit her website at pearlsofshalom.com for more details.